All right. So welcome everybody to the walkthrough of the changelog for the Fuel Attackathon. I am joined today by Green and Kieran from the Fuel team. And today we're going to walk through those changes. So yeah, I'm Alejandro. I'm a triager here at Immunefi, and I'll be helping host this call. So any questions you guys have, please put them in the chat if you can. If not, there's a activities section where you can submit Q&A questions. So I'll go ahead and make sure those questions are heard by the team. So let's go ahead and get started. I will hand it over to Green first for an introduction.
Yeah, hello, I'm team lead of client team. Our team is responsible for Fuel Core and Fuel VM. And yeah, I will go through changelog for those repositories. Many findings were related to them, what is nice. So yeah, some of them are fixed, but also we have our own findings that yeah, we discovered during those 2 weeks. And I also will go over those changelog as well to describe what was fixed and what was the impact of the problem. Yeah, Kieran, do you want to present yourself?
Sure, I'm Kieran. I'm one of the engineers at Fuel on the on-chain team, focused on the Sway libraries in particular. I'll be covering the bridge and some of the Sway libraries changelog features we've got. I think we'll kick off with Green's changelog.
Okay, awesome. And yeah, for those of you who don't know, there is a code update period for this Attackathon. And what this call is for is giving those changes, their effects, and to answer any questions you may have for those changes in relation to the end of the code update period. So the Attackathon currently has an end date of July 22nd. So there's just over 2 more weeks for you guys to find bugs. And hopefully this will also give you some potentially ideas for vulnerabilities that you could find or try to break some of these fixes. So yeah, I can go ahead and hand it back to Green to start getting into the nitty-gritty technical details of the changelog. And it would be great if you could, share your screen. There we go. Sweet.
Yeah. So yeah, Fuel Core, Fuel VM part is already released. Here's our release. Fuel Core is not released yet, but it will be released in 2 hours, hopefully. Actually, yeah, here's the last PR what we wanted to merge, and yeah, it was approved. So yeah, around in 2 hours we'll create release of Fuel Core. But here you already can see changelog at what we've changed. Yeah, starting version 0.30. That version currently is used by testnet. Yes, some people used version 28, then they reported bugs. But yeah, that one was. Please check when you report bug. Please check that you are on the right version. What was specified by Immunefi team. Yeah, regarding changelog here. So from Fuel Core perspective, most of the changes, not changes, from Fuel Core perspective, there were not any findings. Okay, there were some findings from Fuel Core side on GraphQL API side, what required some fixes. Yeah, one of them it's better to go to pull request. Yeah, so first of all, before we had a behavior on Fuel Core side that if there any panic, then we will abort our process. It was we did that because we wanted to catch all issues what we have within the code to update it. But yeah, since right now we're on the stage where people try to break it, yeah, we decided to not abort. Yeah, that one. We decided, yeah, instead of aborting the whole process, to gracefully shut down that. So currently we've changed that to be unwind, because we also had another issue with off-chain database, but I will show you later. And yeah, sometimes because of panic, your database could be in corrupted state. But yeah, now that's not the case anymore. Everything will be gracefully shut down. And in that PR, we also fixed some. We try to remove panics from the code base. For example, here we've had a problem on Fuel VM side that we haven't required contract created to be part of create transaction. When on specification, specification was saying it should be part of contract created output should be part of create transaction. So yeah, we have corresponding fix on Fuel VM side. And now when you construct create transaction, yeah, you also must specify contract created output. But at the same time, we had a panic on Fuel core side that assumed that we always had that thing. So yeah, right now we try to handle, instead of using expect, we try to handle it and calculate it on demand. But yeah, basically the code never should be run, but it's better than do a panic. Yeah, there was another one error. Not here, we just, yeah, here, where you could easily shut down the RPC, public RPC, by just providing after or before, without first or last. And it would hit that line. And yeah, we fixed it here as well. So in that PR, yeah, we are not aware about any other places where you can trigger panic, but we just try to minimize possible part of the code base where it could be triggered. So yeah, if you still can find some panics that you can trigger from outside, you're welcome to report about it. And if it can be done from outside, then yeah, I think we will confirm it.
So a common theme here is kind of these unexpected panics that could be triggered by a potential attacker. Is that right?
Yeah. So here, for example, anyone could send a transaction, a create transaction without contract created, and it would shut down RPC nodes, like actually any nodes that supported off-chain database. And here, anyone could set a GraphQL request, any pagination request, any pagination GraphQL request that contains before or after without first or last. And yeah, you could easily shut down the node from outside. Again, it was because of that behavior. Now we've changed that, and any panics in GraphQL API will not shut down the whole node. Here. But still, for example, in cases like this, it still could be a problem because it will panic here will trigger graceful shutdown for the whole Fuel core service. And yeah, for example, if someone discovered that error, it could be a potential problem. But yeah, I think we've discovered that issue internally, and maybe even Kira was one who discovered that. Yeah, it's like an example of the potential problems, and yeah, change where we try to fix something. But again, if you find something, you're welcome to report about it. So yeah, I think that's all problems that were found on Fuel core side. There was one more when people tried to DOS our GraphQL API. First of all, those it was a known issue. Like we created an issue to track that problem 2 years ago. We've tried to fix that problem before start of hackathon because we know that people will try to break it. I mean, send a lot of GraphQL queries, expensive GraphQL queries that will cause out of memory. But we haven't merged it into, we haven't released it as part of 0.30 because it had some breaking changes and we didn't want to break Wallet, Explorer, and other UI before start of hackathon. So we decided to postpone it and test everything properly. So finally, we've merged that change, and yeah, well, it will be available in the release of Fuel core. Yeah, the basic. Oh, okay, actually, no, it's another one. Sorry. No. No. I lost it again. I don't know how it happens. Let me double check. Okay, here body to be huge. Yeah, it was another problem that we didn't have any limitation for GraphQL queries, but again, it was non issue. Oh, I think it is the name of the PR. Yeah. Oh yeah, that pull request was opened a long time ago. And it's my fault. Here, it should be above. I will fix that. I will move that into that part of changelog. But because, yeah, as I mentioned, that change was created before start of hackathon, it's supposed to go to that release. But yeah, it was moved above. And sorry for that, but yeah, I will move everything in the proper place. So yeah. Here's another change that should prevent not crash from out of memory by just specifying any unlimited request. Unlimited in terms of, for example, you can request block, from blocks you can request transaction, and from transaction you can request status, and from status you can request blocks again. So here will be like recursive query, and yeah, you easily can grab that query and shut down the node. So now yeah, each query has complexity. We try to adjust everything based on its internal load. So yeah, after that release, now any submissions related to DOS GraphQL API will be valid because we supposed to fix that. But if we haven't fixed that, then yeah, people can send now those reports and they will be valid. Yeah, it's one of the changes for GraphQL API, and another one is yeah, to not allow huge request body, because in the past you could request easily. You can send a very huge request that would take around like, I don't know, several terabytes, and not again will run out of memory. It was a known issue before hackathon. Yeah, we've disclosed it here. And now it's fixed. Again, people can try to send some huge data and break the node. During those, so yeah, a lot of people submitted problem related to that area with GraphQL API. But there were 2 candidates who found the same issue, but they exploited that in an interesting way. And they actually discovered another issue. What is not critical, but it just was adding noise into our metrics. So yeah, before we created metric, we wanted to know like how often each endpoint was called by people, just for statistic purposes. And if you will use alias for your queries, we will include that alias into statistic, what was incorrect. So now we will include the role name of the query. Like as I said, it's not critical. It just was added some noise into our metrics. Like we still only filtered it through. We still only created metrics around real queries because it was what we interested in. But a nice small finding, and thank you people for finding that. Yeah, and regarding findings, I would say that's it. All other changes are related to some features that we wanted to implement or some problems what we were involved in the past. Let's say, we finally implemented a state rewind feature that allows you to, first of all, roll back the network, roll back the state of the node back. It includes on-chain and off-chain databases. And another nice thing from the feature is that you can execute any block in the past at any block height for which historical data is available. So for example, you can execute block that was created 2 weeks ago and see exactly how it was executed and receive exactly the same state. It was done during that PR. Yeah, you can read about that if you're interested. Yeah, it's a nice. It's not very important, but it's important feature because now we can roll back the network, and if something will go wrongly, now we can roll back network. Because previously, if you wanted to roll back network, you need to use a snapshot at the past and single from that snapshot to some specific block height that you wanted to use. Now we can simply roll back to the specific block height. And another thing, like it was a required feature to fix the problem with off-chain database. So before, if you will shut down the process, the fuel core, incorrectly, not gracefully, for example, because of panic or because of too many files error that people sometimes had, or any other error, on-chain database, and for example, you committed something into on-chain database, but we finished the process before you committed something into off-chain database. After that point, off-chain database will be out of sync with on-chain database, and basically it was invalid for usage, for normal usage, and it was impossible to recover it back because you didn't have access information about result of execution after restarting of the node. But with state rewind feature, now we can execute blocks in the past, receive result of execution, and process that and update off-chain database after restart. I'm mentioning those features because they are not critical in terms of they all are off-chain. But I would say we want them to work correctly, and if people will discover something there, maybe it can be low or medium severity, just because some feature for stability of the network will not work. There are some nice improvements in terms of for consumers of GraphQL API now. Like before, it was possible that they will have inconsistent view during their queries. Like for example, if you request status of your transaction, if you requested coins, it was possible that during iteration over coins, database will remove some of them, but you will still receive them as part of your query. Yeah, now we handle that through atomic queue and center. Yeah. Also, we found another issue by ourselves that that potentially could lead to fork of the network. That if you will send transaction to transaction pool, so yeah, like first of all, transaction pool verifies, executes all transaction in advance, verifies that they satisfy all rules, all stateless rules, and after transaction pool will include the transaction. And during verification of those rules, we will use consensus parameters. Consensus parameters, yeah, like parameters for the whole network. Based on them, yeah, block is executed and transactions are validated. And our network supports upgrade of consensus parameters. So we have a dedicated upgrade transaction to do that. And if network was upgraded, and at that moment transaction pool had some transaction that were that were checked with all consensus parameters, then during block production, block producer, it's like one of the optimizations. When block producer receives transaction from transaction pool, he doesn't verify them. So block producer will include those transactions, what were validated with old consensus parameters, into block. And it could lead to a situation when block producer will validate include transaction what were validated with all consensus parameters, but people who will validate that block will use a new consensus parameters. Yeah, so now we added logic around that to handle those cases. But again, people can double check it because maybe we missed something. And if that kind of problem is still possible, then yeah, it's high severity issue or maybe even critical. Again, depends on how hard it is to execute.
Yeah, I think an important point to get across here is with these change logs, these vulnerabilities are essentially coming back into scope that were known issues, so that you security researchers can attempt to bypass these potential fixes. So if you're not sure where to look in the Fuel core, you don't know where to start, these change logs may be a good way to start delving into the repository. I do have two questions for you, Green. I think what I wanted to ask maybe was, what kind of vulnerabilities have you been seeing security researchers report that you would like to see more of? And maybe what areas of the code base, and maybe you can show like those directories as well, do you feel that security researchers are not exploring as much that you would like to see?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, you can find Changelog here. Yeah, we try to update it on each commit, and yeah, when you release something here, also you'll see Changelog is updated stuff. Yeah, regarding your question, yeah, let me double check. Have I mentioned everything that I wanted here? Okay, maybe P2P. And here's another example of what would be nice if people will look into. Yeah, as I said, people reported some stuff related to GraphQL API, and I think that's it. So, but on Fuel core side, we have much more. And it would be nice if people will, for example, go into look into like in crates. We have services, and in services we have relayer. So basically, relayer is responsible for bridging assets from L1 to L2. And for example, we had a bug there. like we implemented FTI feature for transaction inclusion feature that's supposed to include transactions from L1. So yeah, people like you can submit your transaction on L1 and it will be executed on L2. We've implemented everything, we've tested everything, but we forgot to add identifier of the event into a layer, like to include those transactions, to actually include those transactions, to listen for those transactions from L1. And yeah, it was nice that we contract side was not ready to support that feature, and because of that, we don't have any FTA events. But because we forgot to do that, it could again create some cases. It can create fork situations because we will miss some events when they should, when we need to execute them. So, and yeah, because of that, it would be nice if people will look more into grades like relayer or into block importer or into executor. Like I would say those three are most critical in terms of what is most critical for the network, because those grades are responsible for all on-chain data. And if the data will be corrupted or executed incorrectly or will cause like an incorrect state, then yeah, it's a serious problem. All other things, they mostly off-chain, like synchronization, transaction pool, P2P, all those components, yeah, problem. But let's say if you are able to shut down P2P, I mean, if you connect to some node and you shut down P2P, then maybe you shut down that node that you've been connected, and now no one, and yeah, basically that's all damage what you did. So network still will work. And the same for synchronization. Yeah, like if you can do that somehow that the whole network will not sync, then yeah, it's a problem. But again, I think at least half of the network still will be syncing because there are many connections and they are done in different way. And the same about transaction pool. If we will lose transaction, like for example, it was lost. For example, we have several issues related how you can lose your transaction in the network. It's still not a problem because end user will be not affected. End user just will wait for 10 minutes and after he will receive timeout notification. So those those places are less critical. And most critical, I would say relayer, importer, executor. Executor goes in tandem with upgradable executor because upgradable executor it is a wrapper around executor that uses the same executor and WASM version of the same executor. So yeah, if something is wrong there, it also could be a problem because it potentially could lead to fork of the network, but it will be patchable fork of the network. So yeah, it's also not non-critical, but it can be like high severity issue. And maybe I think that's it regarding crates on Fuel core side. Maybe you also want to look into storage crate because we have all logic about management, how storage works, how serialization and deserialization of entities is done. And potentially, if something is wrong here, for example, when you will write to database, you will use one decoder, encoder, but when you will decode from database, you will use another decoder. Then potentially it would be a problem because, yeah, again, it can create some invalid situation for executor. Like executor is consumer of that crate. And yeah, it will cause invalid state transition function, but potentially it would cause a fork of the network. So yeah, I would say it's another trait that would be nice if people will pay more attention for that.
We have one question from the chat. Savior asked, in what fuel components most of the bugs have been reported in? I know you mentioned that the GraphQL API was what most were reported for the fuel core, but were there other components that you've seen many reports for?
Yeah, let's say I would say we can divide areas for bugs like into two: one for fuel core, I mean related to client, one for fuel core and one for fuel VM. So yeah, most of findings were for fuel core, but most of valid findings were for fuel VM. So yeah, almost everything for fuel core was invalid except yeah, one panic and one low issue. But for fuel VM, there were much more findings, valid findings.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think about fuel core, that's it. So yeah, main are storage, and inside of services, executor, relayer, importer, and variable executor if you want to play with WASM. And regarding changelog of fuel core, I also there is one more what I wanted to mention. Yeah. So currently, like we know that our P2P is not in the best shape. We have a lot of issues to fix, a lot of stuff, but at the same time, yeah, we've tried to improve. Like we see a lot of load in the network. So currently, we're trying to expose only one P2P node just to see how much load it can handle. So currently, it started to struggle a little bit and network. And some people unable to connect to the node because it at maximum number of allowed connections. So we've tried to speed up how P2P works, and yeah, we extracted lookups into the database into separate threads. So hopefully it should improve how P2P will work. Yeah, just wanted to mention that if people want, they could try to continue to attack P2P. I mean, there's some people attacking P2P, but I don't think that it's a good vector to spend your time, because like we know about a lot of issues. We have proof of concept for a lot of issues, and yeah, I think it's not profitable for you, and for us it just means we need to set up more public nodes. I just wanted to highlight that part. But yeah, about fuel core, I think that's it. And we've upgraded fuel core to fuel VM 0.55. And here, so yeah, first of all, that features that remind what I mentioned here adds some overhead now into commits, because now we need to also update the historical database. And that overhead sometimes can be significant if the contract touches a lot of, if during execution of transaction, it changes a lot of contracts storage slots. So we've tried to optimize that. And tool optimization comes from fuel VM side and from how SMT works, like how sparse retrieve works. And for example, here, yeah, we've tried to reduce number of lookups into the storage into times. And maybe that kind of optimization could introduce some bugs into SMT. Like our test all works, fuzzing works. Yeah, and from a logical perspective, it should work. But if people, maybe you can find something here. So it's one thing. yeah, another optimization comes from that change, but I don't think that it somehow will affect execution. So yeah, it shouldn't break anything. And yeah, we have some fixes in FuelVM. We have some fixes from bugs that were reported by people. Some of them are high severity, some there are not. But yeah, we've tried to fix them. Yeah, first of all, we've tried to fix all low or on-site issues just to avoid people from reporting them. Like, yeah, we try to minimize. We don't want people to spend time on not reported issues. But as an example of nice findings, what you can find and what we definitely will appreciate is, like, for example, that one, where by crafting specific script, you could create a transaction that will be executed differently on 32-bit platform and 64-bit platforms. And this kind of findings is what you want to find. Again, like most of them lives inside of handlers for opcodes. VM, like inside of FuelVM directory, inside of SRC. Here, yeah, basically we have interpreter, yeah, and inside of interpreter we have handlers for all opcodes. And here, like blockchain arrays, crypto arrays, flow arrays, like most of issues should be in flow arrays and blockchain arrays. But other places also can have something, because, for example, there are some problems with ALU. Yes, maybe some mismatches with specification, what is not nice. But yeah, currently, most of critical bugs were found in blockchain arrays and flow arrays. So yeah, if you want to, you can look there more. But yeah, I would say like that whole folder is the most interesting thing for people in FuelVM. The second one, yes, I mentioned maybe Fuel Mertley because we did some updates there. And now by doing that, we invalidated some audits because, yeah, that part was audited many times. But yeah, another thing maybe it's fuel checks, because here inside of transaction folder, we have basically yeah, validity rules for all transactions. And for example, as I mentioned, we've missed that moment that we haven't required contract created output to be part of create transaction. So yeah, it also can be high severity or even more, depends on how you want to use that. So yeah, I would say those two are main area where we want people to look into. I mean, they're most critical for us, but yeah, people can look into other places as well. And maybe like another example of findings, what we're looking for is that if our opcode if our gas model for our opcodes is very like mismatched a lot with actual execution requirement. Like, if, for example, here it was possible in that issue, it was possible to craft a transaction that will perform clearing 64 megabytes of RAM for for very low cost in gas. And because of that, it was potentially possible to cause network to spend more than 30 seconds to create transaction. And like there was one more place what we found by ourselves with the same problem. So let's say like those two are basic example of things what we want to fix and what are most critical. But like there are many other stuff like panics. Panics can be a problem, but not a huge problem. But for example, different kinds of panics can be a problem. Like if you, I'm referring again to that issue. Like if on 32-bit system you will receive one panic, but on 64-bit system you will receive another panic, then it can be a very huge issue in the future.
Yeah, that's a really interesting distinction to have. I think maybe not a lot of white hats are thinking about running the program on different systems as well. So it's a really cool finding.
For example, we are running it on different bit system by ourselves already because to support upgradability, we are using WASM and we're using 32-bit WASM. Maybe we need to use 64 and then we don't have any problems. Maybe we'll change it. But because we have examples where we use 32-bit bits, 64-bit systems. These kind of findings can be very actual. Plus, let's say even if we can use WASM 64 right now, and it will not be a problem right now, in the future for fraud-proof purposes, maybe we want to go with 32-bit systems, and for that cases, those findings will be very critical. I think that's it. That change, it's not related to any findings. It's just preparation for a new feature. Here. Oh yeah, that's finding that the thing that we found during working on the feature, that there was possible to make SP register to be incorrect in terms of it will be more than 64 megabytes. We've checked the code and it seems it was not a critical issue in terms of you can't exploit it properly because all other places will check that it's less than 64 megabytes and now it's not a problem, but still this kind of findings also are nice because we want to be everything deterministic. So if we see something that creates some uncertainty in the execution flow, then in most cases it should be fixed. I think that's it from my side. Maybe one more. We still have several fixes that we haven't released, and we plan to release them later to upgrade the network. We will disclose all those fixes what we want to do in the future and what they will fix. So please check that information when it will be available. Just to not waste your time. And I think that's it. As I said, we will create release today. It will be available for you, and we will also provide a list of upcoming changes, what we want to implement. And that's it. I think we can pass word to Kieran.
Yeah, thank you very much for that overview. Very great technical detail and some good tips on where to look in the code. I think we could pass it over to Kieran to hear about the change logs from his side.
Okay. So regarding the change logs on the on-chain side, okay. So starting off on the bridge, this is a new feature that's coming into scope. The bridge is being is having upgradability implemented. So the quick TLDR there is that it's implementing the SRC14 standard for Sway. For those unfamiliar, this is a really minimal upgradability standard for proxies. It relies on the LDC opcode. which works similarly to upgradability you may have seen on other chains. It sort of runs the yeah, it's pretty minimal. Like all of our standards on Sway, we try and keep them really modular, really minimal, and unopinionated. By default, it isn't owned, but it does have an extension for ownership. You can see here what the run external function from the Sway standard library looks like. It's mostly assembly, but the important thing is, again, that it runs in the current context. It loads that code and runs it in the current context. Specifically in the case of the bridge, this is going to be what the proxy contract looks like. Pretty simple, really. This one uses configurable values to initialize your storage values. Yeah, I mean, again, it's not super complex. Running external is the function that gets you the upgradability. But this is an important one that's going to come into scope soon as a new functionality. Yep. And then moving on to some of the reported fixes we've got. Back in Sway standards with SRC6, which is a vault standard. This was kind of a bit of outdated code that assumed that the storage value had been initialized. It now handles the case of it being uninitialized. Yeah, again, it's important to point out that the examples in the Sway standard library found here are not actually in scope. But on the on-chain side, the Sway standards are obviously really important, and they're a great place to look for kind of basic ideas around, what we imagine these implementations to look like. So I would recommend checking them out if you're going to explore some of the on-chain code. And if you are going to attack anywhere on the on-chain side, it would be cool to check out the Sway standards. Moving on to the standard library of Sway itself, we had an issue reported of the message sender functionality, which mimics, again, functionality you would have seen on-chain on other chains. Specifically in this case, the old implementation assumed that the input of the UTXO was a coin. We now handle the case, and consequently, if you had a different type of input, say a message, it would revert. Now it gracefully handles the message, and additionally, if it's not one of those two types, it implements. In this case, you can see that this is all happening with a while loop. In the event that it's neither coin or message enum type, then it will continue the loop. Yeah, so that's a nice little clean one. On the Sway lib side, we had an enormous number of ports. So this is really good again. Sway libs is a great library to check out if you're looking on the on-chain side. These you can consider as libraries that are kind of not reasonable to put in the standard library itself, but are kind of core libraries that a lot of people will use. For example, the ownership library implements the SRC5 ownership standard. So this is another great place to look if you're focused on chain. We had lots of reports for some of the older libraries that haven't been touched in a while, such as fixed point and signed integers. I've collected them here. These are going to be coming out. You can see there's quite a few that we've had reported, which is great. Yeah, there's a lot, which is good news and also bad news, mostly good news. So these will be coming soon. And we have lots of proof of concepts for all of these, and all of these are going to get fixed and released. And then finally, on the Sway side itself, there's just been a release of a new release of the Sway repo, 61.2 fork. This was because of an issue with deployment estimation. Specifically, I don't know if anyone of the white hats on the call had noticed, but on the latest version, 61.1, you were unable to deploy to Fuel core. This is now fixed as of 61.2, and so now the fixed version is back in scope. And regarding on-chain, that's about it.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you the same two questions I asked Green, which was what were kind of the most interesting vulnerabilities or ideas, attack vectors that security researchers have reported, and where do you think security researchers aren't looking enough at?
Okay, so I would say for me personally, some of the more interesting ones are these floating point value ones in the Sway libs repo. They get pretty complex, and I'm sure there are implementations on other chains that you can compare to. So based off of this, I would highly recommend, if you're someone that works on chain and on chain languages like Solidity, that the Sway libs repo is a great place to look. Again, though, kind of starting with the Sway standard library and then looking at something like Sway libs is probably a great path. And chucking in Sway standards there is where I'd recommend to look. This is kind of the place where some of the more interesting reports, I think, have come in. Yeah, but I would highly recommend following Green's advice. If you've got some time to look at the client and the VM, I think that's a great place to look.
Okay, sweet. And then which areas for Sway do you feel have been under discovered?
So a great place to look and start trying to break things is the new upgradability functionality. So if you come to the Sway standard library and you come to execution, you can see the run external code. It's a little bit of ugly assembly, but if you can start trying to break things, upgradability is always riddled with footguns on a lot of other chains. If other people like me experience the painful days of developing upgradability on something like Solidity, something like this is a great thing to try and break or to try and find interesting new functionalities with. So this is where I would recommend looking right now, is to try and start upgrading things.
Okay, sweet. Very cool. All right. So I think that's all the change logs from your sides, Kieran. Is that right then?
It is, yeah.
Okay, great. Was there anything else that you or Green wanted to add here? I'll give us a second here to allow some white hats to ask any final questions they had. But yeah, was there anything else that you guys wanted to share or discuss?
From my side, no. I just want to say thank you to everyone who submitted something. And yeah, there are very interesting way of thinking how to break stuff. So it's always nice to analyze those submissions. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great job, guys. Keep up the good work. We do have a question from Chiron. Are there no changes to the compiler?
So as of based off the Attackathon code update changelog, there's nothing including it in there. I believe the latest release is that one I mentioned, 61.2, which includes oh no, I don't think it does actually. There's an error improvement in the namespace storage fields, but other than that, I don't believe there's anything in the Attackathon changelog. Let me just double check.
Jabril mentioned something like we just have one fix for faulty register tracking in compiler optimization, but I don't know what does it mean.
Okay. Let me check.
Yeah, but like at the end of the day, we'll have a full changelog for each area where, yeah, if we forgot something, then you can check it there.
Yep. We should be releasing that full change log sometime today. So be on the lookout for that, and you may see that included. Savior had one other question here. Are all the known issues from the Sway part fixed? I'm not sure that's the case. I know that we're including this change log to let you guys know exactly what's being fixed, but do you have any comments on that, Kieran?
No, it's not the case that everything's been fixed yet. But as Green said, the changelog is on the repo is kind of the best place to keep an eye on. We do a decent job of keeping those up to date, but not everything's fixed.
Okay, good to know. All right, we're gonna leave one more minute for any straggler questions for you guys here. last chance. Okay, we got some clapping in the chat. So I think you guys have answered the questions pretty well. So Kieran Green, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate having those with the technical experience coming onto these calls and sharing their knowledge with our community. We do have one more question that I think maybe we have some just a second to answer here. We'll answer that and then we can end here. So T-Myth says, for the compiler, the impact sometimes depends on the implementation of the DApp affected. Do we have to write hypothetical DApps for those compiler bugs, or do we just provide a minimal test to show where the compilation goes wrong?
So from the compiler's perspective, the more information, the better. But I think the way to think about it is if whatever the information you're providing allows us to reproduce the error so that we can understand where things are going wrong, that's fine. So if you can write the hypothetical DApp, that's great. If minimal tests get the job done for allow us to reproducing the issue, that's fine too.
Yeah, and I think importantly, writing that hypothetical DApp will allow you to demonstrate those high-level impacts if you find an impact that it relates to. If not, the closest impact currently is contract fails to deliver promised returns, which is low. But of course, you want to spend the time to kind of try and understand those higher level impacts if you can and demonstrate those. Okay, cool. With that, I think we can end here. Again, thank you, Fuel team, for your time here. And yeah, really great call. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you too. Bye, everyone. Good day.
See you.